Hey guys, it is Marcus and Terry with you on this beautiful Thursday morning. Hoping we are going on the right stream. Let's make sure. It looks like we're good. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about alcohol abuse and the lies and what society views alcoholics as and what society thinks that the answer is to alcoholism. Because there's a lot of mental health gurus and self help gurus and mental clarity people, therapists, and everything like that. And I think a lot of times our society gets the whole thing wrong when it comes to being an alcoholic, when it comes to what to do with an alcoholic, everything like that. So if that sounds like a good topic for you, type your questions in the box. And Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day here, except it's going to get kind of hot, about 104 where I live.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. You could go for a bike ride and lose like 10 pounds in about 4 minutes.
There you
So that's
go.
always good. All right, so let's dive right in and let's talk about this because I think a lot of people are struggling with society's idea of alcoholism and what goes on. And I put together a little list, and Terry has a little list about what people think. And I know a lot of times we think that, alcoholism is a moral failing. A lot of people think, oh, well, if that alcoholic would just get up off his ass and like stop drinking and get a job and, participate, then maybe they would be able to quit drinking. Or maybe it's something like every alcoholic has to go to AA, or every alcoholic has to go to rehab, or maybe there's a pill for alcoholism, or once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, or anything like that where there's some kind of stigma around alcoholism. And I was actually just watching a tape today or a video today where someone was talking about, just making little steps to get rid of alcoholism. Like, hey, count backwards from five and you'll just stop drinking for life if you just keep counting backwards from five. And her whole thing is the 5-step rule. And it kind of drives me nuts because if you've ever watched the Seinfeld show, it's kind of like that episode where I think it's George's dad starts running around yelling, "Serenity now! Serenity now!" And the whole idea is that he's going to get past all his issues by just yelling "Serenity now" and trying to be serene. And it's kind of like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing where you count backwards from five. And at the end of the show, he gets to a place where he's like, you know, I found out that the problem with that is it's serenity now, but insanity later. Because what's happening is they're actually pushing off the ideas. They're pushing off what's really causing the issue. They're pushing off the things that are causing them to drink in the first place and never really dealing with them, instead just putting a Band-Aid over it. And we try this all the time where it's like, well, maybe I'll just drink once in a while. Or maybe I'll just drink at night. Or maybe I'll only have light beer. Or maybe I'll only have wine with ice in it, right? I actually knew a guy who did that. And so we look at it and it's like, okay, well, is this going to work for us? And modern stuff, I was watching a Tony Robbins video today as well, where he's saying, addiction is like a habit and all you have to do is kind of learn how to deal with a habit. And I'm like, yeah, well, yes and no, because addiction is tied into so many things,
Right.
including chemical dependency, including mental illness disorders, including, psychological problems. It's tied into so many things much more than a habit. It's not like biting your fingernails. Like, it's probably easier to get a guy to bite his fingernails. And the guy who bites his fingernails, you can do some kind of trick or tactic to stop it, where it's like, oh, put something gross on your fingernails and you won't want to do it anymore. And pretty soon you'll break the habit. But a lot of us are alcoholics to the core, and we can't stop. Like, back when I was drinking, I could not stop no matter what. People were like, you're going to lose your house. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your business. You're going to get in a car wreck. You're going to mess things up for people. And still, that wouldn't make me quit. And now, today, I'm like, I'll quit doing something if it makes me lose $50, let alone my entire life. So it's not the same as a habit, and we have to look at it for what it is, and we have to focus on what is the real solution. And I believe that the real solution for an alcoholic is a complete lifestyle life philosophy change. You need to change what has been causing you to drink and get the drink out of your life. That's first and foremost. Is we have to get sober, because if you're not in a sober mind, there's no way you can do anything. So we
Right.
got to focus on that, and we got to look at it and say, well, what was my life philosophy causing me to do? right? And I believe that if you have a strong life philosophy where you're like, okay, well, I used to think everything happens to me, the government wants to take money from me, and um, life is hard. And those were kind of my life philosophies. And now I'm like, well, the government just does its thing. I don't think it really cares who Marcus Campbell is. I really don't think they're up there talking about me. Life happens to everyone. There's 8 billion people. Life happens to all of us. It just is what it is. And when you get to a place where your life is changed, I think it really, really affects alcoholism because you no longer want to drink. And the problem with these tactics of, count backwards or think your way through it or whatever is that you're not dealing with it and you end up being a bitter person who can't drink rather than someone who no longer wants to drink. And I believe those are the fundamental differences. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
No, I agree completely. It's a complete change. I remember when I first got sober, they said the only thing you have to change is everything. And I thought that meant like literally everything that I do, but no, I'm still able to do many of the same things. It's change everything about your mindset and approach life from a different way.
Yeah.
And that starts with the honesty and the willingness and the open-mindedness to try new things
Mm-hmm.
and not to have that contempt prior to investigation and just try these things that are going to help you stay sober and work in a more productive way, really.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it has to do with the ego driven life because all throughout my life, up until I was about 34 and my ego was shattered by alcoholism, I was always building myself up based on what I thought I was and what you thought I was. Like, I wanted you to think that I was this person. And if you came up to me and you're like, no, Marcus, I don't think you're successful, or I don't think you're a badass, or I don't think whatever it is in my mind. And society perpetuates this. It's like, you make 50 bucks or make good money or whatever, and you're the badass. And now we like elect people because they made money, and it's like that has nothing to do with running society. But at any rate, different rant for a different channel. We look at that and we're like, is that really what it's about? Like, is that really what I care about? Like, people think I'm successful, so I get this car, or people think I have it all together, so they come to me for advice or whatever. Is that really what I want, or does the ego not matter? And when you get to a place where you're like, the ego doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, I was beat by alcohol. Alcohol kicked the shit out of me big time. It kicked my ass. And I could look at that and be like, well, I'm weak or whatever. Or I could be like, I'm a chemical being. I put a shit ton of chemicals in my body and it done fucked me up. I mean, pretty basic, right?
Yeah.
And it no longer has to do with that. Like I think about it because I'm like, okay, what if I had this type of channel, but not about alcoholism, when I was drinking? Like, what if I had this type of channel where I try to help people with mental stuff and things like that? I would have looked at it like, it's all me. It's all, look at how great I am. I'm helping people. And now I look at it as it's like, hey, this is ours. Like, you guys are just as important as me. I just happen to be on screen for whatever reason, probably because I got a camera, right? And it's like it doesn't matter anymore, and it makes it a lot more freeing because now I'm not looking at it as I'm good or I'm bad or I'm great or I'm not or whatever, and I'm not living from this ego trying to beat alcohol with an ego, trying to beat it like I'm strong enough. And I used to think, and that was one of the other society beliefs, I used to think that willpower was what would get me through alcohol. Like, if I'm strong enough, if I read enough Tony Robbins books or psychology books, I'm going to beat this addiction. And then I found out it was more than that, right? I found out that alcoholism was first and foremost about the fact that alcohol was on the table. Like, you got to get it off the table. You have to make it a non-issue anymore. And then I also found out that I can't do it in and of myself. I need something outside myself. So let's dive into some of these. I'll go through some of my list, and then Terry will go through his, and we'll kind of discuss each one, and you guys can put in your comments and thoughts about if you've heard these or if any of these have affected your life. One of them I've heard is that people say alcoholics are degenerate losers. A lot of people, they think this. They have this vision of an alcoholic that I used to have. which is the homeless guy in the gutter who only cares about getting alcohol. This isn't, in fact, the case. A lot of alcoholics, you wouldn't even know they're alcoholics. For years, people didn't know I was an alcoholic, and even up until rehab, they were like, "Why do you go to rehab? He seemed
Right.
fine."
Me too.
Um, so, you look at that, and it's not that you have to be this way, although, hey, those people need help too. But a lot of people are in suits and ties. Like, you would be shocked, or maybe not, how many people in suits and ties making a ton of money on Wall Street are alcoholics and addicts. Like, they probably have the biggest per capita over there. And so we look at it and it's like, okay, we need to debunk that myth because it doesn't mean you're a degenerate loser if you're an alcoholic. Another thing that people say is that alcoholism is a moral failing. A lot of times we look at this, and in our society, which is pretty much perpetuated by church type thinking, right? It's like, okay, this is moral or this is not moral. This is good or this is not good. I think Hank's going to town on a shirt or a pillow or something. He's trying to get it.
He's adjusting his bed.
Yeah,
He
he's
will
making
go
his
down.
bed.
Sorry about that, folks.
Oh no, he's cool. We
And then
like
he'll
seeing
start snoring.
it. Yeah. So alcoholism isn't a moral failing. It's what happens when certain things happen. So like, if you look at it and you were to say, let's say you take people, and an extreme example would be like a concentration camp, right? You go back into the 40s, you go to a concentration camp, and people in concentration camps did the craziest things that would be looked at as amoral or non-moral, um, because they were under extreme circumstances. Those circumstances produced something in them that wasn't really them. It was the product of the circumstance. Or like the Sanford prison experiment, where they went through and they took a bunch of normal people and they put them in prison. There were guards, fake prisoners. And after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, these people started acting like real prisoners and real guards and getting in fights because it was the power of the situation. So alcoholism isn't so much a moral failing as it is a power of a situation. And when you're found in alcoholism, you are under the spell, you're under the control of a substance. And that substance is making you think and do things that you would never do in your right mind, right? Like in my right mind, I would never go to a bar and steal drinks. It's like I got money to pay for drinks, I'm fine. But for some reason, when I drank, I thought that would be funny. In my right mind, I would never pick a fight with a guy 10 times taller than me or bigger than me, right? I wouldn't do it. But when you drink, you're under the influence, which is why they call it that. It is influencing your behavior. So what needs to happen is you need to look at it and say the drink is what's causing this. So we need to get rid of the drink, then you get the real person back. So that's one of the big things, because a lot of people are like, well, if you just got right with God, maybe you'd be stop drinking. And maybe that works for some people, and for others, maybe not. But we got to look at it as this isn't so much a moral failing as a spell we need to get out of, or a situation we need to rise above and see through. Another one is another one is you are an alcoholic because of your past issues. This is a big one, and this comes down to something me and Terry talk about a lot, which is the reasons you're an alcoholic. You can spend your whole life trying to figure out the reasons you're an alcoholic. It's because my mom, it's because my dad, it's because my uncle, it's because of this, it's because I lost my job, or whatever past issue you have. And now I'm not discrediting past issues. Past issues are big, they need to be dealt with, and some of them are terrible. But that's not the reason you're an alcoholic. That might be the reason you drink, right? You're like, okay, I don't know how to deal with this, so I drink. But the reason you're an alcoholic is because you're taking so much alcohol that it's now craving itself, right? You have to have alcohol, and alcohol wants nothing more than more alcohol, right? So we got to look at that, and we got to say, okay, this is what we need to deal with, and we have to deal with the alcoholism first. All right, Terry, you want to go through a couple years, and then I'll come back to my list?
Absolutely. One I heard early on, and this was when I was still drinking, and that was, why don't you just quit drinking? and and I just couldn't explain it at all. I had no reason why I couldn't quit drinking, but I knew that I was going to go get another bottle when I ran out. That's for sure. Another one, why did okay, so I went to rehab and then I started drinking when I got out of rehab, and I've heard many people ask this question, was what why did you start drinking after rehab? I mean, isn't rehab supposed to fix you?
Mm-hmm.
And really, when they told us this in our rehab, at least, I don't know about the other ones because I haven't been to the more than one, but they they said, you know, it's easy to quit drinking here. There's no alcohol here, and you're not allowed to leave. So that's it. You can quit drinking here. The real test comes from when you get out of here. And that's
Yeah.
what they were trying to do, is try to change our mindset like we just talked about, and get us so that we can continue on when we get back to the real world and alcohol is all over the place. So that was another question that I'd always hear. You know, here's another one. I can still go to bars and parties and just not drink because I don't want to drink. And that comes down to just the willpower. And, you know, I tried to quit drinking through willpower many, many times. I'm sure many of you have tried the same thing, and it ends up not working. And, you know, this is really for, especially for early on in early sobriety. When I quit drinking, I did not go to parties. I didn't go to bars. Um, Now I'm able to. I don't make it a habit. I don't go hang out in those places. And when I go to a party, I go right on time when it starts. I'm usually one of the first people to leave. And that's just because, you know, people start drinking and they're starting to get out of control. And that's my cue. I don't want to get any of those triggers that I don't know if they're going to hit me or not. I haven't felt any alcohol triggers in quite a while, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, another one is you just need to figure out why you drank, and then you can quit. So for me, I don't know why I drank. I didn't have any huge issues in my life. Sure, I was normal. I felt uncomfortable in group situations. I mean, some people don't, a lot of people do. Maybe I always felt like I wanted more of something, and alcohol seemed to take care of that, at least in the beginning. So maybe that's a reason. I don't know the concrete reason why I drank or why I became an alcoholic, but I do know that I am. And I don't focus on the whys. I focus on the solution and trying to just do what I need to do to stay sober. And that's really important for me. Um, you know, another one that this isn't really a myth with alcoholism, but one thing in relation to the parties that I just talked about is, why don't I get invited to parties a lot? A lot of times I find out about some party that a good friend had, and I just didn't get invited, and sometimes that kind of hurts. But you know, it's because they know there's going to be alcohol there. They know I'm an alcoholic because I'm pretty open with it. It's not like I advertise my alcoholism on Facebook or anything, but I'm pretty open with it. And I don't really care if people know. But they don't want to invite me because they think I'm going to be uncomfortable. They just care about me, and they want to see me stay sober. And once the people realize that I'm able to go to these events and I have a game plan and all that, then I usually start to get invited to these things, and I don't feel so left out. But uh, some people, it's just a reality of getting sober.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ones I have.
Yeah. A couple others are alcoholics are hopeless. Um, I'm glad I wasn't hopeless because the last 5 years have been pretty good. But they look at it as like hopeless, and they say, "What do we do about him? They'll just never stop." And I remember thinking that there was a guy in our rehab. He was like 70 something years old, and dude was he just couldn't stop, and he'd rehab after rehab after rehab. And I find that the common theme is that they're hopeless unless they have a better life. Alcoholics are looking for a better life, plain and simple. This life isn't working for them the way that they want it to, and they're trying to force their solutions on it. And instead
Right.
of living life on life's terms, like, hey, this is what happens. Like there's Kevin who comes in the chat and he says, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent because I lost my job. Girlfriend left me. It's difficult staying sober. And I would challenge you to look at that and say, it is your thoughts about the issues making you discontent, not the actual issues. Right? Because the actual issue happens, it comes and it goes, and that's what it is. Right? But it's dwelling on it. It's looking at it as I am discontent, right? And this is why Buddha said, all suffering comes from desire. Desire is I want something else. And you look at those words, and he's like, I lost my job. My girlfriend left me. So it's like I want my job and I want my girlfriend. That's desire. So you're discontent. And we look at it, and it's like, what if I lived a life free of desire and free of expectations? And I know this is pretty much impossible, and I know I fail at this miserably, but for the last 5 years, actually trying to do that has really helped me. Because it's like, I'm not really that discontented. I'm actually okay. Right now, if I drink, that's another story. Because what drinking does is it brings the ego to the surface, right? There was two things Buddha talked about a lot. One was the ego, and the other was desire, right? And when that ego comes to the forefront, you're always thinking about you. And I found out, someone told me two things in sobriety that I was flabbergasted at. One girl said I was a control freak, and another person said that I'm egotistical. And I was like, not humble little me. I always want to help people. What are you talking about? And she's like, well, they manifest in different ways.
Right.
Self-pity is ego. If you have self-pity, it's thinking, oh, I should have more. I should have better. Poor me. Write the country song. Should be better. And you feel discontented. And you go drink, and drinking loves depression and discontentment. Because if you don't have something to bitch about, start drinking. You'll be like, damn can's empty. Shit. You'll find something to bitch about when you're drinking, because oftentimes that's how we're prone. I'm prone to that. I know that one drink or a couple of drinks is going to tweak my brain enough to throw me into that old habit, that old thought pattern, because my brain still thinks that old thought pattern works. It still thinks it works, and it still does something for me. Maybe it makes me, not have to be responsible for anything. As an alcoholic, I never thought I was responsible. Oh, it's poor me. I'm not responsible. And I learned, hey, yeah, you kind of are. So that's a big one as well. And alcoholics are not hopeless. Alcoholics do not lack willpower. We're some of the biggest willpower people as well. Here's the proof. You have the willpower to drink when no one fucking wants you to drink.
Right.
Like, I had the willpower. I went to jury duty freaking hosed. Like, hosed out of my mind. Right? And, like, I'm going to go to court drunk? How freaking stupid is that? And that's the willpower. Like, I had the willpower to be like, I got this. Luckily, I didn't have to go to jury duty for the whole day. They let us out at 3. But at any rate, you got to think about that and be like, wow, I do have willpower. I'm just using it on the wrong thing. And that's not to say willpower is the only thing you need to get sober. You need a plan. You need to say, what am I going to do instead? How am I going to change my life? How do I think differently? And it's interesting because I don't know how you view it, Terry, but for me, sobriety was a lot about opening this door in my brain I didn't know existed. That was like all these thoughts that were outside of my current bubble of what I knew was right. Right? I had my bubble, and this is what I knew was right. And Terry would come to me and be like, you could be wrong. And I'm like, I'm right. It's in my bubble. You're wrong. I'm right. And then this door opened, and it showed me one thing. And it said, well, shit, Marcus. Could you possibly be wrong about that one thing? I was like, yeah, I could. Maybe. And probably not, but I could. And then I found out that I was. Right? I was wrong about drinking. I thought I had it under control, and I was totally wrong. I was wrong about a lot of my belief systems. And when that door was opened, it was almost like, wow, I can't really look at myself the same again because I could always be wrong. I could always have an off-base thinking. And it opened up to see that it wasn't all about my ego trying to control what I thought was right and wrong. It was just about life. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow. And you could look at that as freeing, or you could look at it as depressing. Some people look at it as depressing, like, oh, well, if you have no beliefs or no concrete evidence that you think is okay, then you're out there, right? And I'm like, well, I kind of like being out there because we really don't know anyway, right? Does that make sense to you guys?
Well, it's interesting because you opened that little door to humility,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, well, maybe I can be wrong about my alcoholism or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you started to realize, it started to smash your ego. And then as you continued on and you continued on drinking, and maybe that little door of humility was open, it eventually completely destroyed your ego. And then there's where the depression can kick in.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of you hit that bottom
Mm-hmm.
of just, I can't do this. I need the help. Why am I like this? All this stuff's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you start to get that humility and realize I do need the help, and I
Yeah.
need other people to help me get sober. I need to change whatever I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it was wrong. And you started to build your life back up through that humility and through that lowered ego. And then you were able to get honest with yourself and start doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you just said.
And I think building from that,
Yeah.
because sometimes things want to creep back in, like, oh, hey, yeah, that's pretty cool, and sometimes I'm proud of myself, and that's cool, but it's more of like a proud of like, hey, that's cool that I got to be part of that, rather than I created that, I'm the king, and it really changed a lot of how I look at things. Because one of my big hangups with alcoholism was money issues because I was a businessman and successful for a while, and then it started to tank when I was drinking. And it was always kind of like a troubled issue for me because I always looked at it as like, my money, this is mine. It's like the Hungry Hippos game where you're trying to get as much as you can. And that's how a lot of people look at it instead of like, well, last I checked, the dollar bill says like property of the United States government. So it's not really mine anyway. And it's not really much of anything. I mean, it just doesn't even matter as long as you're okay and you have what you need. And those views changed. Right now, I'm like, hey, it doesn't matter all that much. Win some, lose some. It's all good. Instead of, trying to hoard and control and everything like that. And, it's the difference between living like a scared person where there's not enough in the world to opening your view and being like, well, hey, these problems really aren't money or this or that. These problems are like, they could be solved. Like, there's plenty of food on earth for everyone to eat, right? It's the ego that's stopping everyone from eating. It's not the food. Where's the money going to come from? Well, there's plenty of money. Like, they invented it. They can invent as much as they want, right? And it's like, you got to look at that and say, a lot of these problems I have and the problems you have, whatever it is, these are problems that we in and of ourselves invent, right? It's like, I have this issue with this person. Well, why? Why do you have that issue? Okay, well, that person lied to me. Okay, well, that person's going to lie whether you're in their life or not. Have you never lied to anyone? So what? So you protect the people that are harmed, obviously. Like, if, someone's hurting someone, stop that. But if it's something that's not hurting someone, just, hey, whatever, go do what you're going to do. This is what I'm doing. And I find that acceptance is big. Accept that people are the way they are just because that's the way they are. I used to try to change everyone. If I could change everyone to fit my needs, then the world would be perfect. And it's like, when did you ever run a world? I've never ran a world. It's like those people who talk politics and they solve all the problems, right? They're like, this is the way it needs to be. And I'm like, yeah, but another Seinfeld reference. He's like, but you're a cashier. And he's like, what would a cashier know about this, right? Not that there's anything wrong with cashiers, but I wouldn't want them to perform brain surgery on me. I'd want a brain surgeon for that. Same kind of thing. We're going around acting like we know all these things, when really we don't. The fraction of what we really know is really nothing. And I think surrendering to that is good. Okay, another one is alcoholics drink all day, every day. Not true. Some are actually very controlled alcoholics that drink certain times of the day. I was one that drank all day, every day. Um, but that's not the definition. The definition of an alcoholic is someone who continues to drink despite negative consequences and cannot quit.
And
Another big. Oh, go ahead.
let's go back to that one real quick, because that one can be dangerous for somebody that is an alcoholic but doesn't think so.
Hmm.
And in fact, sometimes my mind goes back to the days when I was actively drinking, and I would sober up for something,
Hmm.
and so my mind will go back to that time where I sobered up and like, I did this and I was really it came out really well. I was very successful at this thing and I was sober. So maybe I'm not an alcoholic. My mind
Hmm.
will sometimes go there and no, I'm
Yep.
definitely an alcoholic. And that's not true. I work with a person that he's very productive too, and very good with his business. And his alcoholism is the fact that he would just a few times a week he drank almost every day, but then he'd get really hammered every once in a while, every 2 3 weeks, and then maybe every couple of months he'd have some sort of an accident, like fall down the stairs, and he almost died in one of his accidents, and he realized that he's got to quit, and he tried doing it on his own, couldn't do it. He'd end up in the hospital again, but eventually he realized that he needed help, and he needed help from other people, and he worked it out and is able to stay quit to this day. But it's not necessarily an all day, everyday thing for everybody.
Yeah, and that's a big one too, because for me, when I was trying to get sober, I would go 3 weeks without drinking, and then I would start up again, and I would kid myself and be like, "Well, I could stay sober 3 weeks. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not." And my fight was I'm not an alcoholic, and I would find any reason to prove to you that I wasn't an alcoholic because I was afraid of you taking away my alcohol. Right, that was the biggest fear I had, was
Yeah,
what is life going to be like without alcohol? What's going to happen when I get in a fight with my wife? What's going to happen when I do this?
absolutely.
When I go this place, am I going to be funny? Right, am I just going to be like lame and not funny anymore? um, and I look at those, and
Yep.
I actually found out that those were all 100% big fat myths. They were outright lies. The same person you are is the person you are. You're actually a better version. And that's what I really find is like, I think a lot of times alcoholism is the breakthrough that people need to just live at a different level and be like, hey, now I see things differently. And you kind of see through the curtain. And you're like, okay, I see how all this works. Instead of playing the game and being in the game, I could just play the game. And, if I win or lose, we just pack up and go home. That's cool. Whereas before, I was like, no, 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 no. I rolled a 5, you bastard. This is what I'm going to do. This is what we're going to do. Instead of actually rising above it and being like, hey, you know what? I don't have to be in this. Because a lot of the things that we have are within our society. And everything that you have, everything you hold dear can be taken from you. Can be. And you could be given a whole bunch of stuff. Right? And it's like, we don't know. We just live the way we live, and we find contentment within ourselves. And we find contentment in the fact that we're just here. And we find contentment in simple things like hanging out with people, talking to people. Um, and yeah, so alcoholics don't have to drink all day. Another one is alcohol is not as bad as drug addiction. I remember when I went into rehab, and I was talking to one of the counselors, and I was like, so did you do like, heroin and stuff, or just alcohol? And I didn't mean anything by it, but this guy he got kind of butthurt about it. And he's like, what do you mean just alcohol? What do you mean? And he was talking about how alcohol is probably one of the worst drugs ever because it's not looked at as a drug, and the detox is actually one of the hardest detoxes out of all the drugs and alcohol type stuff. And I think a lot of times we're like, well, I just drink. I'm not like the dude shooting up down the corner. And it's like, well, yeah, you kind of are. It's just socially accepted.
Right.
That's the only difference. And I find that sometimes with like, heroin addicts or coke addicts or whatever, it's a little bit easier for families to let go of those people because, again, it's not socially acceptable. Um, and so we got to look at that. And no matter what you do, it's like it's all an addiction. If it's causing your mind and your life to go out of balance, then that's probably an addiction that's messing with you.
Yeah.
But alcoholism is just as bad as anything else. It's just as serious as anything else, if not more. It just doesn't get a lot of media attention because of the fact that, hey, what commercials come on during that news show you watch? Oh, look, it's alcohol commercials. Gee, wouldn't want to talk bad about that. So a lot of it is cultural conditioning, and we need to see past that and say, you know what? Screw this shit. Alcohol is a real problem, and I need to do something about it. And the last one I have is alcoholism is a habit or a vice. It's not a habit. It's not a vice. If you're an alcoholic, you are chemically dependent on alcohol, and you need to get help for it or figure out a new way to live around it. So that's the end of our list. Let's take some of these comments. I know the comments are kind of going
We
crazy.
got a lot. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Lots of good mornings in the beginning. I just kind of scrolled back to the top. And Libby says, good morning, trying to stay positive. I'm back at day one again. Getting tired of relapses. Feel like nothing is going to help me anymore. Well, no, you can quit. Our director of our rehab that Marcus and I went to, he went through rehab 13 times. And last time I saw him was last summer we have a alumni barbecue that I went to, and he celebrated 25 years of sobriety. Anybody can get sober. You can do it. And day one, we all started at day one. I think Brittany mentioned that just a little bit later. But yeah, you can do it. That reminds me. Shout out to Brittany for being on the show last week. That was absolutely incredible, and it was heartfelt. I related to a lot of what you said, and your honesty was incredible, and your story is incredible. I'm really proud of you, and happy that you're part of our channel and part of our Facebook group.
Absolutely.
And that.
Awesome.
Let's see. Scrolling down.
All right, let's see. THC Gamer, he's on here quite a bit. He says he's got 3 weeks today. Awesome. Congrats on that.
Right on.
130 days for Kevin. And Kevin, I think, was the one who's having a hard time in life. Build some tools that you learned over the last 130 days and start to look at things differently, because I guarantee if you go out drinking again, it's going to be a lot harder to find a job. And yeah, it's going to be real hard to find a job. Libby says, on my second day one this week. All right. Or no, that's Dr. Watson said that. Megan, good to see you, Megan. It's been a while. How you been? Let's see. Michael's got 49 days. Congrats on that.
Right on.
Lynn's got 139 days. Kate's a lot of like sobriety going on here. Kate's got 3 months. Awesome. Let's see. Dr. Watson says, the biggest lie I feel society believes is that alcoholics are weak and can stop any time if they just put their minds to it. Absolutely. I remember people, oh, just put it down. Just put it down. Just put that bottle down. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, I always pick it up again. I'm really good at putting it down. I just pick it up again. And that's the deal, is alcoholics are really good at quitting. They just suck at staying stopped. And
Right.
what we need to do is we need to build things that we're going to do, because knowledge will give you options, but action keeps you sober.
Yes.
Like, I can have all the knowledge in the world, but if I have a drink, everything's out the window.
Yep.
So the action's really what's going to happen. Ty's got 178 days. Awesome.
Good job, Ty. Let's see. Strictly Smart. I'm taking cannabis dilution without THC, and it's helping me with my anxiety and cravings. Okay. Well, I don't know about that. I don't do anything. Well, I do drink caffeine, but that's it. That's all I do. I wouldn't recommend anything else for anybody, but whatever works for you.
Yeah, and I mean, if that works for you, that's good. Make sure that it's not another addiction, and make sure it doesn't tweak with your brain, because that's the biggest thing for me. Is I don't want anything to manipulate the way that I think, because
Exactly.
I've worked really hard in sobriety to think the way that I do now, and it was deliberate, right? It was completely deliberate. I was like, this is the way that I want to think. And some of it wasn't on purpose, some of it just kind of happened. But I actively went out there trying to learn new things and be careful with that. I don't know how CBD without the stuff works. I don't know. I took it like one time years ago. Um, but yeah. So, okay. Watson, I quit smoking many years ago. That was an easy one compared to trying to stop drinking. Just can't seem to get it, and that's why I love what you guys are doing. Thanks for that. And also, if you guys do like what we're doing and want to support it and help keep us going, go to talksober.com for just $17 a month. You can help out the show. That's the price of like one beer at the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's funny. Ricky says, I think there's a lie we tell ourselves that we need alcohol to deal with life, when in reality, we don't want to deal with anything
Hmm.
slash feel difficult emotions. We are human. We have emotions for a reason, and I agree completely with
Yep,
what you're saying,
100%.
Brittany. Um, yeah, the alcohol. I used alcohol to escape, and another thing on top of that was all that did was push those emotions off to the next day, and then I'd be all hungover, and the emotions would be even worse because I got being hungover on top of all those emotions that I was dealing with.
Hmm.
Nowadays, I've just learned that sometimes I'm going to be sad, sometimes I'm going to be irritable and discontent. It's going to happen, and I just know that it's going to pass, and I
Yeah.
try to be grateful for what I have, and that seems to help a lot.
It's funny too because when I when I was drinking, I would go to a social gathering, and I suffer from anxiety. It's gotten a lot better now, but sometimes I get some flare ups. And I would go to a social function. I'd get anxiety. I'd get a drink immediately. I'd be like, okay, here we are. Where's the bar? There it is. I'm going to get my drink. And 15 minutes later, I'd feel all right. And I'd be like, cool, I got this. I can do this meeting. Um, and then as I got sober, I figured out if I go there, I don't go to the bar. 15 minutes later, I feel pretty good. My anxiety goes down, and I'm like, I got this. So it wasn't even the alcohol helping. A lot of it was just the mental stuff. And drinking because of anxiety is the worst thing you can do, right? That would be, I don't even know an analogy for it. And I'm not going to try, because when I try analogies, they come out bad. And people are like, what? Um, but drinking for anxiety makes anxiety worse. It
Yes.
heightens it. It lowers all your ability to fight the anxiety, and your base level anxiety goes lower. So, like up here, when I was like 20, before I started drinking heavy, I would have moderate to light to moderate anxiety. And then when I started drinking, I got anxiety where I couldn't walk around my housing track. Like, I couldn't even go get the mail. That's how bad my anxiety was. And so you take this guy who has like a little bit of whatever, probably everyone's got some anxiety. And then I drank and I couldn't go get the mail. And I was like, how did I get from there to here? I know. I know what it is. I need to drink more, and that'll help. And then it got even lower, and I couldn't even leave my house. And so we look at it, and it's like the solution is the problem. Your solution to all your stuff. I don't want to feel things. I don't want anxiety. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to think about this. That is the problem, because it creates more. It changes your base level. You look at depression, right? You got depression, you drink, pretty soon you're a depressive mess for years. When it was something normal, you probably would have gotten through in like a couple of months, right? So we got to look at that and be like, okay, well, what's really going on here? And we got to separate it and be like, okay, what's the shit alcohol's causing, and what's the shit I really have, right? Because when I was drinking, I thought I had all kinds of PTSDs and all this, and some of it I was diagnosed with, and they are real things, and I'm not discounting it or anything. But some of them are also alcohol induced, right? Like I remember once I went into my therapist and I developed a head twitch because I was drinking so much and I didn't want to feel things, and it was something I developed. And she looked at me like I was like this little science experiment. She's like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "Okay, I see how this is gonna go." And it was something totally fabricated by drinking, and it was something that normally I wouldn't have. And I was like, when I drank, it went away. Same thing with issues with parents and family. It just kind of went away. I didn't care about it anymore. It was like, why do I care so much? And the fact was, I really don't. Um, so yeah, let's take some more here.
Well, Kevin had mentioned that he's miserable, and then Lynn was talking. You said that you're sorry to hear that, and got to stay strong. And you mentioned that Lynn, you mentioned that you replaced, I guess, drinking with something else, but it's another not so good but less harmful thing that you replaced it with, and that you wouldn't recommend it because it's another disorder. And I kind of did a lot, replaced my drinking with other stuff, but not chemicals or something I intake. It's just what I do, like walking my dogs and riding my bike. See my cup, eat, sleep, cycle. But doing things, going to the beach, hanging out with my wife, um, and just hanging out with other sober people, doing sober activities, and that's what I replace my drinking with. And that keeps me busy, keeps me out of thinking about the fact that I not able to drink, or well, that was early sobriety. Now it's just not even a factor. But that is the what I did for replacing the. So what else we got here? Ty, 178 days sober. Good
Awesome.
job. Have a very strong support system in breaking the cycle of family alcoholism. Alcoholism doesn't discriminate. And yeah, I have a family of alcoholics too, but I didn't have to deal with it personally as much. Some people have to deal it head on, and that's a difficult thing. But having that strong support system is what I tried to develop right away, and that's what I did. And that was just part of getting over that fear of talking to other people about my difficulties that I have trying to, going through sobriety and not knowing what I'm supposed to do next, and asking for suggestions and taking them. And that was my support system, and it still is. And that seems to help me a lot.
Yep. Let's see. We got a lot of comments. How are you on time today?
I can keep going for a little bit, no problem.
Okay. Okay, man, this is like the comment novel going on here. Isn't the definition of addiction something that you want to stop but can't seem to? It's close. I think it's different based on what you're addicted to, because alcohol is a issue where chemical dependency comes involved, so it kind of changes it a bit. But yeah, let's see. A lot of people are talking about feeling depressed and not liking the way life is. Someone said they wake up depressed. My question to that would be, when you wake up depressed, are you going to bed drunk? That could be what's producing that. And also, I heard something in rehab that was, make a life you don't have to run from. Right? Is your life something you
Absolutely.
have to run from? Is it something you don't want? And I'm not talking about external things like, okay, money or job or girlfriend or whatever. If we're always looking to external things to make us happy, we are always subject to what's going on in the outside world. Like people who banked their whole life on the stock market, they all flipped out yesterday. Right? They're flipping out, going crazy. And it's like, well, bounce back today, went down more in 2007. And, it's kind of like that, because what I used to do when I drank, it was like the stock market, right? Like if you look at an old stock market chart, let me see if I can bring one up to show you guys what I mean. Let's see, stock market. I'll bring it up. It'll make sense when you guys see it. Okay, where's the images? We'll do Dow Jones. Okay, and this is kind of like your life. So let me see if I can bring this up here. All right, it's going to block Terry for a minute, but you guys will get the idea here. All right, so this is our stock market chart, right? And yesterday, if you were to look at it yesterday, right, or this is today, so let's do the week, right? So you look at it yesterday and you're like, okay, well, on the 14th, shit hit the fan and this sucks. This is really bad, right? This is terrible. My life is over. Everything's bad. But if you go back a month, you're like, well, it's a little bad, right? It's a little bad. But if you go back a year, you're like, well, it's not that bad, right? Like it was down here and we recovered. We're okay. And here it is here. You go back 5 years, hey, overall it's doing pretty good. It's okay. It's kind of going up. Maybe sometimes we have our downs and ups and whatever. And this is what life is like, right? You're like, you could look at it and you could ride this wave and be like, oh wow, I'm at the pinnacle here. Oh, today's shit. Oh well, yeah, great, great, great. Instead of looking at it and being like, hey, it just is what it is. It's going to even itself out if you invest in the stock market. Historically, you're going to gain 8% per year. Kind of how it is, right? With life. You're going to go through peaks, you're going to go through valleys, and you can ride the peaks and you can ride the valleys, and oftentimes it's going to lead you to craziness instead of just looking at it and being like, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, life goes on. It's okay. Win some, lose some. Hope that made sense.
It does, but if
All
you
right.
keep drinking, that it's going to keep going down rather than going up by 8% per year.
Well, and then what's going to happen too is you're going to get used to it. So,
Right.
like, if you drink and you go back as far as you can, you're going to go here, and you're going to be like in 2008 when the stock market dropped drastically, and then you're going to look at it and you're going to snapshot this little part, and you're going to base everything on this, and you'll be like, well, man, I'm feeling 7,000 today. Hey, today I'm 8,000. Yay! And then you go back to 7, and your baseline changes, and you start to be okay, feeling shittier, right? Like I was drinking just to not feel like I was dying. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna drink because I feel like I'm dying today, and that was like a good day. And for years, I was like, hey, this is okay. I'm not dying. I feel like shit all the time. But it was like, take the alcohol away, and your baseline goes way up, right? So that's kind of what we want to look at there.
Pamela says, I dislike how if someone views you as an alcoholic, that's all they view you as, a nasty, ugly alcoholic. That's a ridiculous stigma. And absolutely, Pamela, that is a ridiculous stigma. And, that's kind of why I don't sit there and advertise that I'm an alcoholic. And I don't really care if people know it. But generally, what I try to do is I do esteemable things throughout my life. And they realize that I am not the nasty, ugly alcoholic and that I'm a good person. And the other thing I do is I hang out with a lot of sober alcoholics, and they know that we're just people just like everybody else in society, and most of us are good people. And that's what seems to help me a lot.
And also looking at, really isolating that you're not the person you would be
Right.
when you're under the influence. Like,
Yeah.
you're not you, right? Like, if I pumped you full of whatever drugs, you're not going to be the same person. It's like those people, and this is kind of a beef I have if you ever want to learn more about it. It's called The Myth of Mental Illness. Good book. I don't know if mental illness is a myth. I have no idea. I'm not a doctor. I don't think it is, but it's a good book nonetheless. And he's talking about how in our society we take these things where people are different, and maybe we think they're crazy or whatever. When we put them in a mental institute, you pump them full of drugs, and the person's just a completely different person, right? And you're like, I don't even know this person anymore. Why? They're pumped full of drugs. People don't even know you anymore. Why? You're pumped full of alcohol. And we look at it and we're like, let's separate the alcohol and the alcoholic behaviors from the person,
Yep.
right? Because you're not your disease, right? Like, I don't really like, I'm Marcus, I'm an alcoholic, because it's like, okay, I'm not really that. That's not how I define myself. Am I an alcoholic? Sure, I had trouble with alcohol, and that's the issue. But am I all the stigma that's with it? No. Am I a current alcoholic? And like Terry says it, I'm Terry, a recovered alcoholic, or recovering, or however you want to call it. And it's like, we are not our addiction. We're not our thoughts. We're not our things we've done. We're not the things that were done to us. We're something more. And everything that you've gone through your life is a product of a situation you were in, right? You acted different because you had a certain set of parents and a certain upbringing. This is why people in poverty, like, you have the self-help gurus who are like, everyone can make it, everyone can do it, everyone has equal opportunity. Well, no, they don't. Everyone doesn't have equal opportunity. That's why you have people that are born into gangs and stuff like that have such a hard time getting out of it. People that are born into, poverty, hard time getting out of it. Why? Because they were put in that situation. And if you were put in that situation, you would be that person. Plain and simple, hands down. If people had your makeup and drank the amount of alcohol you drank, they'd do the shit you did. It's the way it works. Right? And to sit here on a moral high horse and say, I'm better than that, or I didn't do that, or I wasn't that bad, or I only drank light beer, it's a bunch of hogwash, because it's like, you would be the same person. Every single person on this call, if Terry and I drank the amount you did, had the makeup you did, had the mindset you did, we'd be you. We'd be sitting there right now being you. It'd be the same thing. And you got to look at it and say, it's the situation, it's the alcoholism. We can blame it and be like, oh, it's my situation, let's have another drink. Or we could look at it and be like, it's the situation, and now I can see out of it. Because once you see out of it, now you're like, I get it. It was all complete indoctrination, mind control from my situation. Now I can see out of it, and I can see how things will affect me. And I could see how sometimes a guy will do a job, like in Japan, they have a term for death by working. They literally work themselves to death. They have support groups. They have churches that deal with this issue, and they literally work themselves to death. And that's not something we have here, not in big ways that they do in Japan. Why do they have it there? Because of their society, because they've been conditioned. But if you could take someone out of it and say, hey, look, this isn't all there is. There's more to life than the amount in your bank account. Maybe they could see out of it. But if I was born in Japan and I was that, I'd probably be the king of them, and I probably would have worked myself to death at a young age, because that's the way it works. And you got to look at it and say, how much of these thoughts are really mine? How much of it's really mine? And I guarantee probably like very, very few of them are actually your thoughts. And so we got to separate that. At any rate, that's my little talk about that.
Yes.
Danon says, I got a nice shirt. Thanks, fellow Tool fan.
Oh, is that what it is? Right on.
Yep, Tool. It looks like it says Fool, which I don't mind because I am a fool too. But it says Tool.
Right
Good
on.
band. New album. Good song.
Ty says, I want to thank you both personally, because the traditional way of AA isn't for everyone. Did AA years ago after busted for underage drinking while in Navy for the first time, sober since I was 17 and a half. And yeah, AA isn't necessarily for everybody. It's something that you really have to go all in for if you want it to help you. But that's great. I'm glad that this is helping you a lot, Ty. That's awesome. And
F417 says, I'm 48 this September. I want alcohol out of my life by 50. With that kind of mindset, I would venture to say you're probably, when you get 50, you're probably going to be like, I want alcohol out of my mind, out of my life by 60. Because what you're doing is you're putting a date limit on it, saying, hey, it's okay if I drink up until here, but by 50, I want it all out. And setting goals and things like that are good sometimes, but I want to caution you against it, because it also provides a way out. Instead, why not look at it, I'm going to be 48 soon, big deal, I'm going to stay sober today. And what am I going to do tomorrow? I stay sober tomorrow too.
Right.
And what about all the alcohol in the cupboard? I could dump it out in a safe way, because it is flammable. So you got to watch out for that. But yeah, be careful with that and really look at it. Daisy says, it's hard to have a happy medium. I'm going to try my best. Anything is better than drinking every day and feeling like your liver will swell up to a balloon. Yeah, I would try to find what makes you content. Because they actually found that happiness derives from several things. And I think this is one of the things AA gets right. And I'm not like an AA spokesperson or preacher or anything like that. I haven't been in over a year. Um, and even then, I go like maybe once a year because I like the social aspect. One of the things AA gets right is the social aspect. And in our disconnected world where we sit around, like I literally go to restaurants and there's a couple that are together and they're texting other people. And I'm like, okay, how is that connection? But one of the things AA gets right is they do give you the connection to other people, which so many people are lacking. And it is an honesty kind of place, which is kind of cool. But when they did studies on happiness, they found that having close people around you to talk to was one of the things that made people happy. And they actually did studies of people in India who have houses made of plastic tarps and people in America living in suburbs. And on a happiness scale, wasn't all that different. Like, the guy in America wasn't really that happy. Why? Because he was chained to his stuff. He's like, I gotta have this. If I lose my car, then I suck, or whatever. And they found that the happiness was derived from things internally and people around you rather than stuff. But unfortunately, in westernized culture, it's all about stuff and materialism and things. And if I just had that, I'd be happy. Why don't you be happy before you get that? Would be my way of looking at it.
Right on. Did you already do this other Daisy Girl one, my fourth day sober?
No, I didn't. I don't
I
think
did a
so.
3-day juice cleanse to refresh. I feel great, want to keep it going. Also, any thoughts on CBD for my anxiety? And we did touch on the anxiety thing. I would not recommend any. Well, I don't know the point of your anxiety, but for me, I just learned to deal with my anxiety. I try not to have to take drugs or anything like that. Some people need anxiety meds, and that's something to talk to the doctor about, obviously, because we're not doctors. But um, yeah, learning to deal with it. I don't think any other chemicals, at least for me, I try to do as little medicines as possible. For me, that's what I like to do. I like to keep a clean head.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Brittany says, from what I understand, alcohol is the second most addictive drug in the world, but detox is considered to be the worst of any of them. That's kind of what I've found out too. It is very addictive, and it is also detox is terrible. I don't know
Dangerous.
the exact numbers, but it does suck. And there was another person who said they used to think that alcohol wasn't that bad because it's illegal. There's lots of things that are legal that aren't bad, or that are bad. So don't trust the lawmakers with your sobriety or your life because they they're not in it for that, right? Like the whole gun argument. It's like, yeah, those are legal and in my opinion, not a good thing to have around. But to each his own. You got to look at it and be like, I'm responsible for me, um, and that's what you got to look at. Yeah, like I think there's no reason for a assault rifle to be legalized. Like no one needs one. There's you don't need to shoot 100 deer if you're hunting in 30 seconds. You just don't need to. So when you're talking about legal things, you got to look at both sides of the spectrum and be like, okay, not everything legal is good. Just saying. Let's see.
Daisy mentioned, I don't want to get high. I just want to go to sleep without having to drink to do it. And the reason I mentioned in this comment is I felt the same way when I was
Me
drinking.
too.
I'm like, I need to drink to go to sleep. And then I got sober and my sleep sucked for a while. But then it got better slowly, and then it became great. And now I hit the pillow, I'm asleep. And
And just don't fight it. I think a lot of times we have trouble sleeping because we fight it. Listen to a talk, you know, something calming. Like I find if it's too mentally stimulating, I won't fall asleep. But if it's something calming, like I like Ram Dass, Alan Watts, guys like that will help, and or maybe some music. And just don't fight it and realize that you've had downers for a long time. Alcohol is a depressant, it's a downer. Makes you fall asleep all the time. So now your body's like, wait, we're awake. What are we going to use to sleep? We used to use stuff to sleep. And you got to get back into the normal habit of being able to sleep.
Right. Sorry, I'm reading comments.
Okay, let me get Renee. Hi, second relapse, and I met my doctor again. Heard about the Sinclair method and naltrexone, which makes alcohol taste bad and make you not want to drink. What do you think? I think naltrexone and the Sinclair method, I'm not going to dog it because if it does work for people, it does work. But I think what it does is it produces a bunch of dry drunks. And by dry drunk, I mean a bunch of people unhappy that they can't drink anymore rather than dealing with the issue. I think your issues are usually deeper than alcohol because that's what made you want alcohol in the first place in the capacity you did. Um, and I think that a miracle fix isn't going to get you where you want to go. And in the AA book, Terry would probably know more about this than I do. They talk about the fourth dimension of living, where they're like, hey, I never would have gotten to the fourth dimension of life. And the fourth dimension of life is the life you don't have to run from, the good
Right.
life that you're happy with living. I don't think a miracle fix is going to take you there. I think personally that alcoholics and people who deal with anxiety and a lot of these issues are on the verge of a breakthrough if they go enough further, right? And I don't mean enough further in drinking. I mean go enough further into digging into your life and saying, what is it that really makes me happy? What is it that I believed all these years that could be a lie? What is it that's stopping me from feeling the way I want to feel? And then once you get through that, you're like, hey, there you go. And you can move through that.
Yes. Andor says, 6 months sober and I wanted to quit more habits. Coffee is gone too. 1 week. And also that was hard, man. So good job, Andor, and good to see you again. Awesome. Um, let's see.
Julian says it's an illusion that we can go back to alcohol without any problems. It's a total illusion.
Right. Right. And that's what takes a lot of us back.
Kevin says, Marcus, what are your thoughts on AA? I think AA has a fair share of problems, like many groups do. I mean, you can't find a group that doesn't have problems, especially if it's a group of people who just got quit drinking. So there are going to be issues, but it does work for many people. I think it has some really good principles. But I think you also need to look at it and, understand what's going on so that you can figure out if it's right for you. Also, when you do go to AA, remember you're there to get sober. You're not there to meet a spouse, meet a friend, be cool. You're not there for any of that other stuff. You're there to learn to get sober. And I think if you use it as that, use it as the tool it was meant to be rather than like a way of life, if that makes sense.
I think AA can be a very good tool for getting and staying sober. And it does keep me hanging around other sober people, which I think is good because it keeps me away from bars and things like that. But AA is part of my sobriety. It's not my only. It's not sobriety. Sobriety is really a way of life for me, and that's 24 hours a day. And I go to a meeting. You got an hour meeting during the day. A lot of people, when they first get sober, they'll do 3, 4, 5 AA meetings in a day, and that's just because they are really worried about starting drinking again. Maybe they don't have a house to live in, and maybe they just need to go somewhere to be safe, and that can be good. But I talk to a lot of people that have decades and decades of sobriety in AA, and AA, we don't get the healthy ones or the well ones. We get the sick people. And everybody, people have problems. So there's definitely some meetings that maybe aren't going to be so good because of the dynamics of the people that are in there. And you can always try a different meeting or something like that. Other things you can do is hospitals usually have support groups for people in recovery. Those can work. I did some of those in early sobriety, and then I didn't feel that they were helping me anymore, so I stopped those. But those are really great, especially in early sobriety, and a lot of people go to overcomers meetings, maybe at their church or something like that. There's a lot of places where you can get some help and talk to other people with the same problems. And that's really what it's all about for helping remind myself that I'm about sobriety and what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. We got lots and lots of comments.
We do have lots of comments. Also, if you guys like talking sobriety, check us out on our Facebook group. I will put a link in the chat box for you if this will load. Let's see, where is it? There we go. And you can support the channel over at talksober.com. Just click the support the channel button. $17 a month will help us keep the lights on. I think, something like that. And you'll also get a bunch of MP3 downloads and PDFs and stuff as well. I'm going to put that link for the Facebook group in the chat box so you can join that, and we'll take it from there.
Ivy, is that Ivy or LV? I started to isolate and get depressed, but I've built momentum again, and this time I'm going to break free for real. Good job, man. And yeah, that's what usually tends to happen for most of the people that I see that go out is they start to isolate, and that isolation gets more and more depressed. That's why I try to stay out there, stay busy.
Julian says there's a cool app that was shown in a meeting called Meeting Guide. Cool. Julian, we are actually working on our own app that is going to be designed to help you with the issues you deal with in life and sobriety. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it'll be out later this year.
Ivy says, hurts to think where I could already be if I didn't fuck things up again. I didn't even drink, but just making poor life decisions overall. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think everybody on this channel can relate to those bad decisions and where they could have been, coulda, shoulda. I try not to dwell on those things. But, you know, of course, yeah. Could have done a lot of things if I didn't make those bad decisions and drink too much on top of that.
Yep. All right, cool. I think we're about good for now, unless there's any last-minute burning questions. And also, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and give us a thumbs up. All right, I think that's about it.
Good job.
Kristen says she's 2 years sober, watching the channel. Awesome.
Good job. But you know, so our topic today was what society gets wrong about alcoholism and maybe some of the myths about alcoholism. But you know what I think the most important thing with all these myths is worry about your own sobriety. Don't worry about what other people are thinking about you if they know you're an alcoholic or they suspect it. Just concentrate on what you need to do to get sober and stay sober. I think that's the important thing here.
All right. Awesome, guys. So I think that's about it for today. Thanks for hanging out. Join us in our Facebook group. Support the channel over at talksober.com. Stay sober, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.